There's been a lot of celebrating of the new class of lawmakers headed to Congress in January, which includes more women of color than ever before. But when it comes to Beacon Hill, there's good news and bad this year. As of next year, the number of women of color will roughly double in the House. That's the good news. The bad, they'll still make up just 5 of 160 total lawmakers. That's 3%. There'll be only 1 woman of color in the state Senate, down from 2. 3 of those 5 House members were just elected last month. They join me now. Democratic Representatives-elect Nika Elugardo from Jamaica Plain. Pleasure to meet you. Representative-elect Liz Miranda from Roxbury. You are back. Nice to see you. And Tram Nguyen from Andover, who was just one of 6 Massachusetts candidates endorsed by former President Barack Obama. It's great to see you as well. Is it fair to say you're all long shots in your races? Is that the... Well, I know you were. You're running against a sitting Ways and Means chair. Were you 2 long shots or
not? Not necessarily. I think it was an open seat, so I think
there were 4 people
maybe a
running.
chance. I was the only woman.
How about in your situation? You get run against a very conservative Republican, Lyons, who had the support of the governor, that sort of thing. Were you considered a long shot?
No, I think we had a very competitive shot.
Why'd you do this, by the way? I'm going to go down the line quickly. I met you in Las Vegas
Yes,
at a union convention a long
did,
time ago.
Yeah.
Why'd you decide to do this?
Well, as you know, we work both in the courtroom and at the State House working on legislation, and Jim has not met with, well, he refused to meet with me for 2 years as I was working on bills like paid family medical leave, earned income tax credit, and other bills, and I find that to be very troubling because as a state representative, you're supposed to represent the people, even people who disagree with you. And so I decided to, I've lived in this district for about 5 years and grew up in the area, and I know the people, and I have the skill sets to represent the people.
Why'd you decide to do this?
A couple of reasons. I lost my youngest brother to gun violence 15 months ago, and I don't think any family should go through this. And I felt like when I followed sort of where laws were being made and where money was being supported to help stop gun violence, I felt like I could make a bigger difference in the State House.
And what was your reason for deciding to do this thing? Probably the most uphill fight of these 3, I would argue.
Well, years ago, I felt convicted that I was a cynic against politics instead of somebody that got in and tried to change it like women around the world were doing. But this race was because after Donald Trump got elected, I wanted to see Massachusetts take stronger leadership on certain issues like immigration, like education, and really structural change in general to sort of address poverty issues in more than a piecemeal way. And a lot of folks were asking me to look at what was happening in our district, and I thought I could be a stronger, bold progressive than the guy we had in place.
Do you, can you do that? I mean, is that realistic when you're a freshman, as you all 3 are, part of a fairly small caucus, as I mentioned, of women of color, and the leadership is pretty entrenched in this place, even though the number 2 person you took out in your race. Is it more pipe dream? Is it more long-term kind of thing than you're willing to?
It's a bit of dream and it's a bit of long-term. So I've done leadership development around the world and around this state. And so you might not be surprised to know, based on my race, that I don't believe in entrenched leadership. There's 2 models of leadership. There's the kind where you ascend a pipeline of positions, and there's the kind where you mobilize people, which is what we've all done. And when you mobilize people, you can absolutely have structural change.
So if you don't believe in entrenched leadership, does that mean you're not supporting the Speaker of the House for re-election?
I'm going to support whoever's really strong on democratic governance, which the Speaker hasn't been so far. But he knows that that's what I'm standing for. There's actually a diverse coalition that includes representatives from different years, from different races, from different genders, and we're all standing for that.
And all of us, what we care about is accountability and making sure that we are increasing transparency, which is what all of us are looking to do, and that's what we're here to support each other.
I think I heard you say on Basic Black with Kelly Crossley after the election, you want more movement on the gun front, obviously for personal reasons as well. We're one of the leaders, maybe the toughest gun laws in the country. What should we be doing that we haven't done?
For me, I see gun violence as an issue of a crisis of opportunity. Often we don't talk about the racial and wealth disparities that are happening in some of our most violent corridors in our Commonwealth because it would speak to other issues. So people make it a gun issue all the time. They often don't talk about how it's a nutrition issue, a housing issue, an education and a job issue as well.
Do you worry about disappointment, any of the 3 of you? I mean, I think it's thrilling that you've gotten these jobs.
Do you really?
I do really. I do. But on the flip side, there are a lot of people who are frustrated in politics these days. Maybe it's because of entrenched leadership. Maybe because you have to have colossal patience. You don't seem to me, from what I've read about the 3 of you, to be remarkably patient people. I mean that as a compliment, not a criticism, by the way. Do you worry about potential frustration?
I mean, frustration comes with all new jobs. It's a learning curve for all of us, but we are in this, and I'm just actually going to speak for myself on this. I'm in this to get things done. I'm in this to actually bring a fresh perspective, new voice, and I think that's what all of us have to bring to the table to make sure that certain conversations are being had. And at the end of the day, it's about making sure we're delivering on what we're promising to the district. That's working hard.
You all
and
spoke
all of us are very
about
hard
change in
workers.
new leadership. Are you two supporting the current speaker for re-election, assuming he runs?
I co-sign that you're supporting the leadership, that if they're for progressive ideals.
So it still remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think that one thing that you mentioned, this is a thing that happens with a lot of where first years coming into the House, we're learning a lot about not only how to manage our work in the House, but there's also, our constituents are incredibly important, right? And so for me, having set a record with over 10,000 people casting a ballot, when you ask the question about disappointment, I believe hope and trust are incredibly important, and so the outside game is as important as the inside game.
You know, Representative, I was a representative-elect. I was watching, as I said, that show where you were on with the new mayor of Framingham, relatively new mayor, and the new, or at least the Suffolk County DA-elect.
Yeah, Rachel.
And you made a comment about the Democratic Party. You said it was straight-up racist.
Yeah.
What did you mean?
Well, American institutions are founded on the core of structural racism, structural anti-poverty. Even if you go back to our Constitution, if you were a white man that didn't own land, you didn't have citizenship rights either. The thing I was making the point there is that the Democratic Party, unlike many other institutions, will not acknowledge the fact that it perpetuates many of the things we're fighting against. And until we acknowledge that it's in ourselves, and you know, as I've spoken on many times, I myself have taken assessments on the ways that I perpetuate structural poverty, structural privilege, structural racism, and the Democratic Party really has to face that head on.
You seem to agree with that. Have either of you spoken to the leaders of the Democratic Party since that show?
I have. I actually just came last week, and one of the things that I was big on the show talking about was around this idea of nurturing leadership. Our Commonwealth is incredibly diverse. The zip codes that I represent are the third most diverse in the country. If we don't have a pipeline in the country, Upham's Corner 02125. What's important is that if we're not nurturing talent and making sure that we have room for people that look like me, who speak like us, what happens is that as we're running for office, it's difficult. It's difficult to find the right people to help share the message of the transformation that we like to see.
So do you have more confidence that they get it?
I have more confidence that I'll be at the table helping them shift it.
So I invite you back in a year. You'll be back well before a year. But if I invited you back in a year, your first year in office, what do you hope to be able to tell the viewers you've achieved in year one, quickly if we can, down the line?
Well, I'm going to be at the table to actually make sure that we get our fair share of the budget, because for a long time we've had someone who voted against the entire budget, and I want to make sure that I have a seat at the table and actually work.
How about you in a year?
That we look at gun violence legislation differently, and that the criminal justice reforms we voted in are actually implemented to help our district.
And how about you in 12 months?
I want to see education fully funded across the state. I want to make sure that we're moving more passionately and forcefully on solar. And I also want to make sure that we're changing our housing model to a housing for all model, the way that we've done in education and healthcare.
I hope it all happens. It's pretty exciting. Representative-elect, Representative-elect, and Representative-elect. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.